Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Lunch Table Podcast. For this episode, we are looking back at the Transformers live action series. If you haven't checked out our Rise of the Beast review, that is out now. Check it out. We had a lot of thoughts on it. So Akram, we have 7 movies out now.
Yeah.
Some good, some bad.
Yeah.
Let's get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, as the late Robert Ebert said, if you want to save yourself the ticket price, go into the kitchen, cue up a male choir singing the music of hell, and get a kid to start banging pots and pans together.
That's a long quote. I'm surprised you memorized that.
Yes, and that is kind of the summation of the Transformers movies. No, for the most part, me and you grew up with the Michael Bay Transformers films. I think for the most part, we enjoyed them when we were younger. Looking back, though, we could definitely see the flaws and why some of them have a lower Rotten Tomatoes score. But for the most part, you can't deny that it was revolutionary in its CGI and also its action sequences. They were really expensive, big budget movies, and you could definitely tell. And they brought everybody together, like from China, international, everywhere. So you can't fault them for that. At least they were successful. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of fond memories. I mean, take each one with a grain of salt, of course. They're not without their flaws, but for the most part, they are very entertaining, and they're very, big summer blockbuster franchises. They're up there with, Pirates of the Caribbean and Star Wars, of course. Some were like really high grossing at the box office. I think Revenge of the Fallen is still like of the series, like the highest one. And they're a great, showcase of not just CGI, but also like a lot of stunt performances as well.
Yeah.
Great, action. And I think the first one will always be iconic. I think it just resonates with audiences a lot, just because up until the first one, we hadn't seen Transformers live action. It was mainly animated. So to see it for the first time in theaters and how good the CGI looked, it was just breathtaking, right? And we didn't expect to see, them how they would look for the first time. So it really lives up to, the hype. And it's aged like masterfully now that I've rewatched like the first one. Following that, I mean, the sequels weren't as good, but they still have a lot of great moments in them, especially with Optimus and Bumblebee. I think some of the villains kind of grew lackluster over the series, like Megatron especially. I didn't like how they did him in I think it was Age of Extinction when they turned him into Galvatron. I think they kind of downgraded his appearance a bit. And the cinematics were really good. I actually prefer the saturated look of the first one.
Mm-hmm.
I think the colors just popped and it just made them look really natural with the lighting and the shadows. But I know you might have a different take on it, but what are your other thoughts?
Yeah, I think they were Michael Bay is all about comedic manic moments, and I for sure we see that here. Sometimes they were a little bit too much, and I think I'm not like that type of guy that'll be like all wokey chokey here left and right, but like there were like a lot of sexist moments or like just like moments that were kind of cringe that we see here and there, and I felt like that was just kind of pointless. So, and especially for like a movie set around like kids' toys, it was a little weird, but for the most part, the characters are awesome. They're voice acted by a brilliant cast, especially Peter Cullen. Makes a return after, what was it, since 30, 40 years? Because there was different voices for Optimus Prime in the past for animated series. So it's really cool to see him here. And there's such a huge history between, like in the first movie, how a lot of things were leaked. So now we're kind of used to that, but they're better at keeping things really locked in the vault. But back then it was a different story. And so to grow up with these movies, it was definitely something as a collector. Like it was a brilliant time because each movie you could look forward to. The toys, I definitely collected a lot of that, except Dark of the Moon. If you guys know what I mean. For some reason, Dark of the Moon was like really hard to like get your hands on some figures, if you guys know what I mean. But yeah, I think they definitely downgraded after Dark of the Moon. I know that Michael Bay was on and off saying that he was going to stop directing these movies, and he comes back each time. So he came back for Age of Extinction. I think that's probably that, and The Last Night were probably the worst two out of
Agreed.
the rest of it, unfortunately. And even the CGI was a little bit more spottier, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think they were just like on so much crunch. And at the time, too, they were really trying to flesh out what else they're going to do in the future. So I think they compiled a list of 12 movies that were in production or are supposed to be in production. So they had a lot on their plate. Things changed a little bit later on when Travis Knight came in with the idea for Bumblebee, and they gave it a new tone. And I actually like this iteration, this soft reboot. I don't know, because it seems like now they're saying that they might play catch up and try to meet the first Transformers movie. That's going to be really weird. I hope they don't play catch up. Just reboot it. New generation, new people, new kids. Just leave it like that. But I think, again, you could sit down, right? There's a reason why they show these movie commercials in the Super Bowl. I think they did that for Dark of the Moon. There's a reason, because you expect that whole crowd from the Super Bowl to watch this movie, and they'll enjoy it for the most part. Maybe they'll find like something stupid, but they'll enjoy it. And it's kind of weird. It's kind of meta, because G1, that series, started out that way. It was, it's very a product of its time. And we're just trying to market and sell toys.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, were you supposed to really take that serious? Maybe not at first, but then they went hard with the movie, the animated movie. And there was a lot of deaths. There was a lot of darker moments. And I think that instilled something for the rest of the Transformers continuity, where we need to have darker themes here and there, even if it's meant for children. And so that's when it started to take itself seriously. And I appreciate that. And then the movies try to do that, but they always revert back to the same cliche, stupid things. The comedic turns left
Very
and right.
formulaic.
Yeah, and it could be a product also of just Michael Bay as a director. Maybe it's like his fault. That's why it ended up. I think for the most part, it's probably just his fault alone. I don't think it's like Hasbro, like fault that Michael Bay did these things, or they were like pushing for it to be. I think they completely trusted him. And the numbers showed. I mean, we're complaining now, but they did extremely successful. So they were happy, but at the end of the day, success is
millions.
weird.
I mean, just from the toy lines and all the marketing that happened. I remember watching the trailers. I got really hyped, seeing them just because they were really good.
Yeah.
And they just they were like fan events almost. They made you want to come out and support this franchise that you kind of grew up with, right? And it was a fresh take, because it was almost like, when you grow up with the animated series, it feels like you're still a kid, but when you watch a live action, it's matured a little bit, so they could go, like you said, with the darker themes too. Let me get your thoughts on the cast, actually, because we have, of course, Shia LaBeouf as Sam Witwicky, who was actually inspired by Spike Witwicky from the animated series. We also had Mark Wahlberg as Cade. I think you and I both agree that the human elements are kind of the weaker aspect of the movies, because they feel like a distraction from the Transformers themselves. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we just reviewed Rise of the Beasts, and they handled the human elements a lot way better than Michael Bay ever did. And so, and let me just say real fast, it's really weird, because they change a lot from the source material or the lore that they're supposed to take from. They change a lot. So, like, again, Sam Witwicky, why not just name him Spike Witwicky and like make him that character?
Right.
Like, why? It kind of reminds me of those early 90s superhero movies where they take so many liberties.
Right.
Just come on, you know what I mean? But yeah, Shia LaBeouf, of course, he's the lead. There's a lot of drama centering around like Dark of the Moon and Megan Fox and this and that, and some gossip here and there. So that was surely a problem, and that's why they probably replaced Shia LaBeouf a little bit later on with Mark Wahlberg and a different cast. And it's refreshing too. So that was like their own kind of like soft reboot, or as if just like turning the page. So, but the characters for the most part, I think, were okay. Michaela, I didn't really care much for, even if they tried to give her some depth with her father that's like in prison, this and that. They tried to do more of that in the first movie. The sequels were a little bit kind of pointless. There was like a lot of drama between these two.
It was like they didn't really learn the lesson, because I feel like they tried to make Michaela a likable character, even though she was kind of like eye candy in the first one.
Yeah.
But then they bring Rosie Huntington-Whiteley in the third movie, and it's like she's a supermodel. So it's like, and you mean tell me Sam Witwicky bag he has unmatched Riz. So he's basically like Rizicon or something.
Rizicon?
Bag. Yeah.
No, you know how? Because he listens to Optimus's speeches at the end, and he like gained some Riz from that. He was like, "Oh
So
shit."
you mean to tell me his one liner is one shall stand, one
Shall fall. Nah. That's exactly
Shit.
it.
I need that type of Riz in my life.
I gotta see you one day just go up to a girl and just say that.
Driver
They'll
don't
call
pick
the
the
cops.
car pick the driver.
Right. You walk past, you catcall people with those calls. That's so stupid. Well, yeah, it was. I mean, yeah, same shit, different smell with his next girlfriend. That wasn't really a great character to begin with either. I think one of like the most memorable characters are unfortunately the most manic. So like Simmons was really funny. Tyrese Gibson is always really great just because I love seeing him yell and like run away from things. It's always hilarious. Yeah. Oh yeah. Anthony Anderson. Yeah. He's great. But that's the weird thing. Is like a lot of these side characters they put in the background in the sequel, so they never like carry over. You know,
I wanted Josh Duhamel so bad to have his own spinoff with Nest. I'm so mad that they never did something with that because he was one of my favorite characters from the first one. I think the second one, I think he even made it to correct me if I'm wrong. Last Night. I think there was a scene where like he gave Megatron his crew back.
Right.
So I'm surprised they didn't like keep him around for like the soft reboot because I think he was like one of the strongest characters of the Bayverse, and it would have been cool to see like Nest, because they're between 1 and 2. Like Nest was working closely with Autobots, so we could have seen like more adventures, take place with that, like fighting Decepticons. I thought that would have been a really cool like thing that they could have done.
Yeah, for sure. He's one of my favorite characters as well. I think as a lead, Sam Witwicky wasn't. There was a relationship between Bumblebee. I think that's that's where really Bumblebee became super popular. Because he never was popular before the Transformers movies. It was always like Optimus or like a different character. And so this is where now a lot of media centers around Bumblebee just because of this movie. So I think that just goes to show how well they handled that character. Although it is weird how they removed his voice box. I didn't like that. And then they made his mouth look like a bottle cap. I really didn't like that. I don't know what was the point because it didn't really, if it was supposed to be like a theme thing, it didn't come through whatsoever, or at least it was outshined for the majority of the movies. So like that was kind of pointless. So I feel like a lot of stuff was left in a cutting room, and again, I just don't like the human characters because I made a reference to this in our Rise of the Beast review. I said that for the most part, it always seems like the Autobots are the lapdogs of the humans, or at least the guard dogs, and you say, get them, or like you do that code word meat or whatever, and they go out and they
clickers and
yeah, I don't like that because it's like, and they put these humans for some reason. I don't know if it's because low key it's because they have nimble fingers and it's like it's like intricate to touch things, but it's like they're always like the human character is the one who's going to type in the code or like do something, and it's like you have Optimus that's thousands of years old, you have all these people, why not have them have the final thing that they're going to do? Why do you always have to do like a finisher? It's always formulaic. It's like the human does something, they stop something, boom, it's over. Optimus fights the main villain, kills the main villain in a badass way and says, you're a piece of shit or whatever, and he kills them and moves on, and then there's a speech.
Or they make like some weapon that they buried millions of, and I hate that they always go back to Earth too. Like Earth is such a fucking like hot spot for buried treasure for the Transformers for some reason. It's like their bank or like their mattress. They put all their shit under the bed. I swear to God, like from the first movie, okay, we see the Allspark, right? And then what was the second movie? It was like the Matrix of leadership.
Yeah.
And then the third one was okay, well, I think it was like the space bridge or something.
Yeah.
And even Rise of the Beast, we had that fucking key thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, and they're always like perfectly sized for humans. For
exactly. Nimble fingers. They just hold things.
Like how the fuck are they like they're building like Rolexes? Like that's how small they're inventing these shits.
It
like,
literally is getting this needle if they're like, and they're trying to design something. You know what I mean? It's like those people who design like sculptures and pencil tips. Like, are you kidding me? Really? Like, yeah, I mean,
conveniently sized.
It's convenient. Weapons. A lot of stuff in this franchise is really convenient, I think, and that's it takes out the stakes a lot. But kudos to them. I mean, they killed Jazz, and I did not expect that in the first one. I'm still disappointed about that. I'm still hurt to this day. So they do kill off some characters. Well, Jazz was the only one that was significant. After that, I think it was Ironhide and Ratchet that were the most significant as well.
Oh,
but besides
God.
that, yeah. They did Ratchet dirty, to be honest with you, in the beginning. They did him really dirty.
Well, didn't they kill off Prime too in the second one?
Well, yeah. But Prime, the thing about, like, if you're a fan, which I could see like a lot of people being like, oh my God. But if you're a fan, Optimus comes back so many times. So at least that's kind of like an Easter egg,
Death
if you will.
means nothing in it. It's like Star Wars now. It's like the
Yeah.
motherfucker come back like Darth Maul or some shit.
Death is not that. Exactly.
Shit.
I mean, but again, what do you think about the art design from these Autobots and Decepticons? Because that's really different from the classics.
I thought they were geniusly designed, to be honest
Mhm.
with you. Because they could have made them look really corny. Because like when you adapt, of course, G1 to live action, and of course, the animated series kind of evolved the looks over time. They were really complex looking, on screen. I think that just kind of added to the realism of it. Just because there's so many moving parts, and it was really revolutionary for CGI at the time. Because I remember Devastator was like one of the most complex animations that they ever had to put on screen. There's just so many moving parts. So and I love in the older. I think now it's kind of corny how they do it, but I love that they took moments to actually watch them transform before they started like fighting or talking, whatever. Now it's kind of like they just like transform like halfway through the fight now or something. But I appreciate the little moments that the animators took to actually like show how they transform, because it's like it's a spectacle in itself just watching them transform, right? That's what you go to see, right? Them go from car mode to robot or robot to car, right? But it was wonderfully done how they designed them.
And it's one of the most important things that's probably on the top of their list when they were thinking about making these movies. It was, how are we going to transform them? Will they look like G1, kind of boxy and go inside themselves? Or is it going to be like super intricate? And especially Optimus, I think that's the most that like jaw-dropping transformation in the beginning.
The first time he transformed was like, it was like a masterpiece in CGI.
Yeah, and they had balls to do it because it must have been so difficult to do. And then plus it was a swooping shot and it just showed all of them and it was amazing. It really was. Although it is like Transformers is a type of property where you can't think too deep sometimes. You could think about the characters that are deep, but when you get into the realism of things or try to make logical sense, it gets weird. Because like, for example, how come does the Autobots or Decepticons, they take their time sometimes to transform just to show off, right? And then at other times they're like super fast. It's just like a part of the spectacle, as you said. So when you make that super apparent into movies, I feel like that always should be subtle. So when you make that super apparent, it takes away from the feeling of it staying with you a little later on. Maybe if you're a kid, it's different. Because as like children, we see this for the first time. It's like there's nothing that could compare to it. And so that's how we have it in our heads. But for like adults, I don't think it'll stay with people. And I think that's a huge problem.
Well, when they tried to break it down to a science in the third one or fourth one, I believe, when they said like, oh, transformium is this element that can turn into anything, and then Galvatron became like pixelated or 16-bit. I thought that was the corniest, and it was really lazy how they made him transform. That's why I didn't like that movie too much, because I actually like watching them go, like how complex, because it's like when you're a kid too, you appreciated when you had the figures,
right? And
you had to go through the struggle of actually, it was like a Rubik's Cube. Like you had to like solve how to make these complex machines, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that they, took their time with it in the early movies, made me appreciate it more. And then I love how, the different designs they took over. I mean, they had different vehicle modes too. I think Optimus went through several different iterations. Bumblebee popularized the Camaro so much. I remember so many Camaros got sold. I think that first year that Transformers came out, and until now it's still like one of the most popular cars too. And it's also a showcase, big budget, so they had to have like really nice cars. I think I forgot what Jazz was. Was he like a Lamborghini?
Like a Porsche something,
or a Porsche or something like that.
Yeah.
And Mirage now is like a 90s Porsche too. So it's a really cool showcase of like different vehicles of the time and the eras too. I love the Decepticons too, how they look like a Blackout. That first scene that set up pretty much the tone of the Transformers, when he invades the military base, I thought it was so like scary. Like
Yeah.
if this was like real, we'd all be fucked.
Yeah.
like screw terrorist attack. Like I would just like bow to the Decepticons day one. Like, I'd
Yeah.
be like, forget that.
Yeah, I always enjoyed the transformations. I must say. I mean, I could watch for hours a compilation video on YouTube of just them transforming, and then hearing the sound effects. The sound
amazing
design is
sound,
amazing in these movies. Since the very beginning, I think they've been nominated too for sound design in the past, for just that. But unfortunately, they won a lot of Razzie awards as well. So everyone notices that the story is like really weak, but I think it really feels like a movie that is a tool to use for marketing and to sell toys products, but also contribute something to the American economy. I feel as well, like with a lot of car sales, as you said, a lot of people got into cars, I think, from seeing Transformers and probably took mechanic roles when they became adults later on. So it did a lot for American economics, or
which is
the
what
economy.
the animated series did also
Exactly.
for toys, right?
And Biden is probably like that shapeshifter lady.
Quintessa.
He's Quintessa. And Trump is Unicron or something. That's what it is.
I know, I heard it all.
Hey, I wouldn't doubt it at this point. But no, I mean, I think that's why it became a staple, and you even could see this movie be mentioned in what is it? The Guinness Book of World Records here and there. So even if the story is lacking, the actual movies are something that I think will always be, hopefully not a stain on cinema, but something that it will always be like a benchmark. And that way you could kind of appreciate it for that, because it's a lot more than just the story. It's like different elements combined. And that's how the animated series were as well.
Yeah, for sure. Now, there's a lot of lore behind the Transformers. There's several different series animated.
Yeah.
Do you think these movies did a good job of kind of taking the best parts of the comics and animated media and putting that into live action?
Hell no. Fuck no. Hell no. That's why I said it's like the early 2000s superhero movies. No, hell no.
Sure.
I mean, they know Cybertron, that's a given. They showed Cybertron here and there, but they took liberties with the design. I wasn't a big fan. I love the Bumblebee opening sequence. I think everyone loves that sequence because it stayed super true to the actual source material. Unfortunately, when you add human characters, you also have to give them more of a spotlight, so you take away from exposition. And you got to do exposition subtly. So Transformers movies don't really do that subtly, but we don't mind because it's just cool to see. They make sound, like, for example, what's his name? Shockwave or Soundwave? What's that satellite guy?
Soundwave, I think.
Yeah, they like did him really weird. He was a satellite, then a Mercedes. Just the different scales of these, like if you think about it, like why are they different scales? They never gone into that. They never said like their actual name. It's always Autobots, Decepticons. At least now with Rise of the Beast, you hear Maximals and then you also Terracons and this and that. But in the beginning, it was just like Autobots, Decepticons. That's it. And then the lore wasn't really like, who the hell's, okay, you got Quintessa, so you got Unicron, or they're trying to bring Cybertron here. Like they didn't really go into detail. What will that imply in the future? Who started that? Like we don't get into the history that much. They tried to in Transformers 3. And then again, they're really loose with it because literally the Transformers have been here since the dinosaurs were around, apparently. So like, and you have that guy Grimlock that he's just an absolute moron, and he thought that he could hide from T-Rex and transform into like a T-Rex. So like, it doesn't make too much sense. They took so many liberties with the lore, and I don't appreciate that as like a fan. But the average goer won't really care, I guess. But what about you? What did you think?
No, I agree with you totally. I think they kind of, not even, I wouldn't say cherry pick, because there were a lot of discrepancies I had with, just the story elements of each film. I think it was very formulaic. Like I said, it just focused on like some big super weapon, and that was the focus, right? They had to stop Decepticons from getting this weapon or whatever. And then they tried in The Last Night to kind of bring like the origin stories of the Transformers a little bit, with like the history and Unicron, but it was kind of like a mixed bag because like the Transformers have two different origin stories, one from the comics and one from the animated series. So it was kind of confusing there. And then they kind of ruined certain characters for me, like Megatron. I mentioned felt like kind of downgraded over the series. I mean, it was interesting in the beginning when they had Hugo Weaving, and then they actually had Frank Weller, who was the original voice for The Last Night, I believe.
Yeah.
But I feel like even that couldn't save it because I feel like he was just like another henchman at that point. Or like he didn't feel like Megatron from the animated series because he was already like the Fallen's like second in command. And Megatron in the animated series had like the biggest ego. Like he would not, serve anyone except maybe Unicron. So I just felt like out of character for him. And then Shockwave was like one of my favorite Decepticons. And then they kind of turned him into some robot from Real Steel. Was it Nitro Zeus or whatever the fuck his name? Like that little kid might as well just had like the remote and like brought him into a fight or something.
That's true.
So and even Starscream too. Like Starscream was such a great character in the alternative media, but they kind of did him dirty too. Ironhide, just I could go on a list of just characters that they ruined for me. Hot Rod, I wish would have had a bigger role. Even Optimus too, you could say a little in The Last Night, or others. But were there any like standout characters to you?
Well, for sure, Optimus always. What do you mean, like bad stuff?
Well, in
or
the
just
last
in general.
movie, and I think in the last, well, didn't Quintessa make him like her slave or something after? I forgot.
Yeah, well, Optimus is very like out of character a lot of times. Give me your face, this and that. He's like he's really out of character, and a lot of times for some he like killed that one guy. That's like really out of character, especially from the source material. But I don't mind. I actually like this Optimus from the movies. I always enjoyed this Optimus from the movies. But I think his morality sometimes may be inconsistent here and there, because when you look at the collateral damage, it's like, damn, you did all of this by just transforming and stepping over here. Shit.
Right.
Yeah. Back then when I was younger, actually Bumblebee was my least favorite since the beginning. I actually always enjoyed the other ones that we don't see too much. So of course Optimus. I loved Ratchet back then, his design. Now I know that like when I got a little older, now I realized that, oh shit, he looks super different. That's why I hate, like, I don't know why they designed them super different. At least have the color scheme. But I think also Starscream is always a funny one. He's always pretty like that bird leg bastard from Transformers 1.
Dorito looking motherfucker.
Yeah, and then the little neck thing. Sure. Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know why they thankfully in a reboot series they're trying to stay true to G1. I mean, Rise of the Beast is a little bit questionable with some of their designs, but for the most part, I think it's still pretty classic looking. So yeah, those are my standouts. But I want to ask you, if you could choose which studio can start producing these movies instead of like Hasbro and like I think back then, what was it, DreamWorks or something? I think I forgot. What studio would you choose? And it'll be more successful.
I didn't expect that question. Hard to say. I mean, I feel like it's still successful what they've done. I think they just need to kind of push it more. I don't know if it would be weird for me to see any other studio do it, because I feel like they would have such a high bar to kind of live up to. And perhaps it would look even worse, to be honest. But I don't know. That's a good question. What would you pick?
Marvel.
Oh, interesting.
Because they did the comics back then when they wanted to write in some lore. It was really different from the actual cartoons, but that's how it started. It was Marvel doing that. So imagine Marvel, instead of doing just Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff, it also had just Marvel. And then it actually had like their own intro animation thing as well. And it was, they were doing, because I at least you can't, Marvel's going downhill now, but I think if they start to focus on a new IP, they will go hard in the beginning, like they did with the MCU in the beginning, like phase 1, phase 2. And so if they take the reins of story, I think because everyone remembers Iron Man, because and for a number of reasons, right? So you already have these classic voice actors like Peter Cullen, But if you center it on how the cartoons were, or you try to spin up your own lore in a way, but staying faithful to the rest of the source material, I think that they're really good at doing that. I mean, we all talk shit about Disney now, left and right. But again, those things we talk shit about have been stewing in the pot for quite some time. This really hasn't. It's been stewing in the pot since 2007 compared to the other stuff. I know that Iron Man came out, whatever, but relatively around the same time. But there's less movies of Transformers than there are from the MCU. So I feel like they could handle it. And plus, the bigger budget, they need the big budget because all the CGI and whatnot. So you could produce more movies. Because now, I mean, last movie was 2018. Now we got this one. Now we're going to have to wait, another time. And that'll really suck if the next movie is really trash. It's like, damn, there's no hope. And, Transformers, they always had a problem since after G1 and the movie. They always get bad reviews from parents back then because it wasn't their thing. Parents weren't used to this type of stuff. But when children started to get their own voice, they voiced that they actually like the movie, and then with Beast Wars, they had to make a critical change. And that's why they did Beast Wars. And then later on, they did something else with Tommy. And it's like a lot of those things are hit or miss. But for the most part, one still stands, which is actually the themes. And it's like really dark and poignant themes. And so that's lacking, absolutely lacking. And all of these movies, except probably Bumblebee and Rise of the Beasts, finally. But I think it's still too little too late. I feel like they could actually just keep going harder on that front. So if Marvel took over, specifically, it's going to be DC, but it's going to be Disney, but specifically, it'll put Marvel in the beginning or something. I think it'll be really decent. Do another reboot. Forget it. Whatever. Just close your eyes and we're here now. I would like that better.
It makes sense too, because the comics, the whole lore of Transformers actually started with Marvel too, so it makes sense for them to come home, right? And maybe they could flesh it. And that's one thing. Despite what I think of Marvel now, I think they do a good job of kind of looking at the comics sometimes and fleshing that out on screen. So I think they could do a good job of taking the Transformers back to their roots in a way. Because I think that's what's what we said, where is sort of lacking from the newer movies. I mean, the Bumblebee movie and the Rise of the Beast movies had a lot of heart to it, but I think they could also do that with Marvel as well and kind of make them how they were back then. But then again, I'm also I kind of want them to evolve in the way, because the beauty of the Transformers, every time they reboot, they always have some new aspect or some new iteration that separates them, but still has the heart of G1 in a way. But Marvel could be interesting. I could see why you picked them. And if they had kind of that Iron Man 1 style, I would love to see how they, design the Transformers. And, I also wonder who they would actually pick for the voice actors. I don't know if they could keep Peter Cullen or Frank Welker, maybe, perhaps. It's a lot of, corporate intervention. But yeah, it could be really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, again, this is because I know some people in our comments will say oh, these guys are bullshit. You don't know about business. I'm saying as a fantasy, okay? Don't go too hard or whatever. I'm saying as a fantasy, if we could somehow do this merger and we have magic, then this is probably what I would choose. And I think it'll work. And then also you could probably then do shows. It's a lot of work to do Transformers movies, I'm sure, especially CGI. It's going to take a lot of time. But if you have a bigger studio and they've been through this before, look at Loki with the CGI they had, look at Star Wars shows, I'm pretty sure you can make a car transform and have it be movie quality. So that's why I kind of chose that. Marvel, but it's Disney in general, because Disney owns Marvel. So yeah, I think that'll kind of revitalize the series, because right now they're trying to do new stuff with G.I. Joe. We talked about that in our review for Rise of the Beasts. And I don't know if that's going to save them from going down the drought of running out of ideas. Because I feel like they're running out of a lot of ideas, but they don't have to. But the Michael Bay movies felt since the beginning they were running out of ideas. They just use the characters as the ideas, but not the actual story arcs. And so it's use the story arcs, because story arcs have lore that are, they add so much to the actual story and the world. Yeah. So what else do you have to say?
Well, it's like I said, like maybe it's time for them to kind of craft their like on some type of new lore in a way, because I feel like they keep reusing stuff, but it's getting like really old. Unless they, because I really love the Netflix animated show. I know you feel differently, but I actually really enjoyed it. Or they could pull from War for Cybertron, the video game too. I would love to see like Optimus and Megatron's like origin stories, because they're really, it's like I think there was a book too that they wrote about how Optimus was, I think he was like almost like this peasant class on Cybertron, and Megatron was like
Scholar,
a gladiator.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it would be really cool to see them like not at each other's throats, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then because I think in the comics too, or maybe it was the animated series, the Quintessence, which is where they came up with Quintessa, were like the masters of the Cybertronians, and then they kind of like rose up and revolutionized. So to see Optimus and Megatron and this kind of like war story could be really interesting, or they could go even further if they wanted to, like with Unicron and Primus. So maybe it doesn't have to always be about the Autobots and Decepticon. I know that's the trend, and of course that's what people want to see, of course, sometimes. But I think if you make it like Marvel or Star Wars, right? Expand on it, right? Make the lore more enticing, I would say.
Well, yeah, because the problem is, again, they concentrate too much on the characters and cobble a story that makes sense. Like, for example, the Maximals, they threw in their own planet that they were on, but we're going to bring them on to Earth real fast since our human characters are here and right. Optimus and Bumblebee are always there. So we're just going to bring them there instead of like doing some travel thing or whatever. So I feel like they're kind of afraid to bite the bullet to get away from Earth. I know Earth is like the main part of Transformers. They're always on Earth, but I think it's really cool to see Cybertron. And they could get like a studio. I'm sure they could handle it. But like, look at Love, Death, and Robots with the Michael B. Jordan episode. That's all CGI and stuff like that. That's what I'm saying. You could do stuff that looks live action. It doesn't have to be necessarily animated type of quality, like that type of 3D animation thing, whatever. You could do it to make it seem like it's live action when it's actually not. Almost like CGI, like a CGI trailer for like, let's say Diablo 4 or something like that. Like you could do something like that and then one day go to Earth and then now things are different and you could do spin-offs here and like, I feel like it could be really popping. Like I feel like you could do so much shit. Like Jazz has like his own spin-off, maybe Bumblebee here, there, whatever. That's how you do it, honestly. I think Transformers is awesome, but they really have a problem with continuing the story. Each show that they've created always ends in 3 seasons. There's only like some that's not a part of that.
Like a curse, yeah.
Yeah, and still, like you had the Michael Bay movies, and it ended in 5 movies, and then they kind of did a soft reboot. I feel like they really have a hard problem, and I think it's because Transformers since the beginning was trapped in that marketing thing. Trapped in just trying to make more money, and still to this day they're still trapped in that, and it's a shame. It has a great lore, I think, at least so, and especially in the comics. Get IDW has like years of source material that you could pull from, and they, like you were talking about, making things different. A lot of people, they could pull a lot of stuff from IDW, and they reinvented some elements from the actual lore from G1 and G2 and here and there. So yeah.
Let me ask you, do you think kids nowadays still have the same kind of love for Transformers that we did? Or do you think it's kind of fading it with each generation?
No, it's gone now. It's pretty much gone. I mean, we were introduced to Transformers with the 2007 Transformers movie. And we enjoyed the figures and the spectacle. And it's the biggest thing ever. And it's the most realistic looking thing ever in CGI wise. It was that and Avatar. And it's like, and then Iron Man looked pretty good. And after that, like everything was pretty good. But for the most part, it was always Transformers. That was the biggest thing. And kids, I think the saturation in Michael Bay movies adds to that. It's kind of like eye candy. And your eye like gets attracted to that. And so then if you're a fan, you'll look at animated shows. But they had it on the Hub back then, the animated show. So it wasn't like this main, not Pornhub. It's like they had it on the Hub, and it wasn't like this really mainstream type of streaming, or I'm sorry, channel. You know, it wasn't like Disney XD or something like that, or Cartoon Network. Then they added it later to Cartoon Network, but that was their mistake with sticking with the Hub too much. So they had like a lot of weird business moves. So even to get into the lore of Transformers at around our generation is a little bit tumultuous because of all these changes they've made. Like if you just want to watch the media, you know, if you want to read, that's a different story, but watch the media, it's a little different. Nowadays, kids are growing up with Bumblebee. That's a great start, I think. And I could also show kids a little bit of the 80s, even if it's like, you know, they don't concentrate too much on that, but it's nice callbacks. Rise of the Beasts, I think, could be something interesting for kids, although that one was a little bit more mature. But for the most part now, I think even the figures kind of suck now. Like if you guys collect Transformers figures like I do,
That's what I want to talk about, because I feel like the figures now, maybe perhaps that's why there's also kind of a decline in interest, because the toys back then, I mean, say what you want about the 90s and early 2000s, but I think some of them were like really cool figures. Now it feels like very like almost like cheaply made, and every time I go to like Walmart or Target, I feel like it's so barren. It's like Cybertron going to the toy section. It's like there's nothing in Transformers that like really like makes me want to like say, oh yeah, let me. Well, I mean, obviously I'm an adult, but like, you know, you're a big collector too, so you can attest to this. I feel like now the figures like don't have the same love and attention that they did back then. So perhaps like it's like the movies now, like with Transformers has always been kind of, you know, been the focus of marketing in a way, even though there's this big story behind it. It has always kind of been the point was to marketing. But now I feel like there's kind of like not a whole reach now. It's like, what are they really marketing, right?
Well now, yeah, so I think the best business move that Hasbro did with Transformers figures is including a lot of third-party people, like actually, you know, not hiding away from them, and sometimes they promote like third-party stuff. I think with the access to websites now to buy collectibles, you could see a lot more third-party figures for Transformers, but a lot of those figures are centered around G1 classics or Rise of the Beasts, like classics that I don't think the younger audience would really get into. A lot of Siege stuff or like the Netflix series stuff, but I don't think kids will get into that really, because then you have to like log into Netflix.
Right.
So the access isn't really easy to get. So what do kids have to look forward to? It's the figures from the movies. And so Transformers last night, and then we had Bumblebee, and now we have Rise of the Beasts. I think when they partnered with Takara Tomy, that's the best figures they ever produced. When they started to partner with them, like the detail, like this is Cliff Jumper.
Oh wow.
It's like this right now is a lot slimmer profile than it was back then. Back then it was a lot more bulkier, like, you know, in circa 2007, 2009. I think now, I mean, look at this. This is from Takara Tomy. I mean, this is beautiful. This looks exactly like the movie, right? Look how thin that is, like slim that is. So when they did that, for the most part, it was a great business move. And I think that business move wasn't the best for younger kids, though. I think it's better for adult collectors. I think a lot more people, it's more normalized now for people to collect, except for the Red Pill community, but a lot more people, it's normalized for people to collect action figures like we do. So that's why it has to have a lot of detail. But for a younger kid, they wouldn't really care about it. So what do? They also make cheaper Transformers figures they look like kids' meal Transformers figures. They're not really anything. They kind of suck. When I was growing up, the Transformers figures were really intricate. Each one was like a Rubik's Cube sometimes when you had to transform them.
Were like puzzle games. It's still like,
yeah,
the whole playability was just solving it.
Right. But now it's even the packaging is different. It looks a lot more for adults. You know, I don't know if kids could really get into Transformers, you know, and really feel for it as much as we did in the past. I think it's a lot more harder for them to do that.
Well,
I think the only way
now, I'm sorry, I was just gonna say also kids now I feel like are more into like gaming or online things now as opposed to like actual handheld toys. Maybe that's just my hot take, but I feel like now I never see kids like actual play with toys.
Oh, that is a hot take.
That's my hot take. Let me know.
I mean, I don't know. I can't really like attest to that. I don't really know. I mean, for sure, there's a lack of Transformers games, like good Transformers games, since the very beginning. So the last one we had was War for Cybertron, and what was it? The Fall of Cybertron. Even the one was like Battle of the Allspark was ass. We had the Devastation one, which was okay, but that was like more for like adult gamers that really appreciated the G1 styles.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have Transformers Reanimated, I believe it's called, or Reignited or something. And I don't know how that's going to be. I hope that could bring a newer generation of fans, but I kind of doubt it. So basically, Transformers feels like it's nostalgia-based fandom rather than trying to gain newer, younger generations to enjoy Transformers. I mean, you could kind of say the same for Star Wars, although Star Wars, they did something smart. They have their mascots, so they have Grogu. They could bring new people in. But even with Star Wars, I know this is a Transformers Revisited, but even Star Wars, they don't have like the new movies. So they're not producing as much content. So for the fans, we know about Ahsoka, we know about the lore, right? So we pay attention to that. That's why we're super excited. For Transformers, that's a different story. Transformers, you starting off from 2007 Transformers movie. Now, if you want to go like, as some people say, deep state, you want to go deep state into Transformers lore, you're going to have to visit G1 or visit these awesome YouTube channels that talk about the lore, and you're going to discover a lot of things. But then you're going to realize that, damn, the movies don't adhere to the actual source material. So it's like, what should I really be a fan of? Should I pay attention to stuff in the past? So then again, you're going to be a nostalgia-based fan. So you're always stuck in this cycle, and they have a really big problem. And maybe we're nitpicking too much. Maybe this is just the curse of Transformers. This is how it always will be. That's the point. Maybe they're fine with that. They make their money at the end of the day. That's it. And we love seeing eye candy. That's fine. But I think I'd like to see more substance because I do appreciate the lore. And I think it's an idea that will always forever be iconic. And every time you see a Peterbilt truck on the highway, you could imagine that's Optimus Prime. And that's something very special, right? It's more than meets the eye. That's my quote for 2024 presidency.
That was a perfect way, I would say, to end the conversation.
Sure.
No, great points, man. Yeah, I
totally
agree. I think the substance thing was on point. I think now when... I think of Transformers, most of it is nostalgia based, but like I said, I think I just want more out of it every time I go to the theater now. It's like, what are you bringing something new to the table, I guess, with each iteration, make it, fresh and unique. And like you said, make it perhaps enjoyable for new audiences as well. Besides, 20-year-olds in their basement collecting hot toys or something. We're a dying breed, unfortunately.
Oh man.
But yeah, that's all we have to say about it. Guys, thank you so much for sticking in for this Revisited. It was so fun talking about, one of our favorite franchises. Check out our Rise of the Beast review that we did for the new movie. It's out in theaters now. Check it out. Check out our other playlists. Leave a like, subscribe. Anything helps the channel. You can check out all our other playlists. We do a lot of Revisited as well for other, franchises like Star Wars. We did one for May 4th, so check that out as well. But yeah, guys, so much. Thank you, and until then, roll out.
Roll out. See you guys.